when you see an article like this and you say, hey, the mishap rate is up, what's the fix? How do you fix that? Unfortunately, just like it took 20 or 30 years to get us to this point, I think it takes a better part of a decade to get us out of it.
All right. Recent data shows significant spike in U.S. military aircraft accidents. The number of major accidents involving military aircraft spiked in 2024. Internal Pentagon's figures show a series of high-profile aviation mishaps with deaths, unfortunately. And the loss of aircraft in 2025 suggests the disturbing trend may be continuing. It talks about the severe accidents per 100 flight hours rose 55% in the 2024 budget year compared with 4 years earlier. It says the Marine Corps saw the highest increase, nearly tripling its rate over the same period. It talks about Class A mishaps. Talks about aviation expert noted that the broader worsening trends are unlikely the result of a single factor, but rather a reflection of multiple smaller issues that accumulate to create an unsafe culture. So I think a lot of things that we talk about on this show, mover training, lack of aircraft, lack of money, all of this stuff kind of adds up. These issues increase operational demands. They even throw in the COVID-19 pandemic. Statistics cover the full budget years of 2020 to 2023, and then the first 10 months of the 2024 budget year through July 31st. So they have a couple years of data to go on. In those 10 months of the last year, 25 service members and Defense Department civilian employees were killed and 14 aircraft were lost. Wow. Dude, here we go. Several military aircraft have been especially prone to crashing. The Osprey, they pick on the Osprey. Apache helicopters had a 4.5 times rate of the most serious Class A accidents in 2024. C-130s in there. C-130 transport plane nearly doubled its rate over the same period, even as it's reported safer in the years between. Keep going, Doug. It just talks about different aircraft. Keep talks about the Navy.
Let's stop for a second. Doug, your ads of fuel filters look a whole lot like something the ATF is going to be interested in.
I know nothing about this.
This is wife's account.
This is not my browser.
Like what? Okay, anyway, sorry.
Brings up the Black Hawk midair in Washington, D.C. Keep scrolling. The Harry Truman, unfortunately. Some of the losses self-inflicted, obviously. In the spring, the Harry Truman lost 2 Super Hornets in the span of a few weeks. One had bad landing, another slipped off the flight deck, which we covered. So keep going, man. And they mistakenly shot one down.
Most recently, we're part of an elite team that does nighttime missions, died when their Black Hawk helicopter crashed near a base in Washington State. That was the Night Stalkers.
Did we cover that?
Mm-mm.
We didn't talk about that.
I thought I had him scroll up because I thought they were talking about the DCA crash, but
yeah,
that's different.
Yeah. So, this, to summarize, across the board, DOD, we're struggling. And so we talk about it a lot on this show as far as money for training, aircraft for training, funds to create slots in different, B courses, RAGs for training. And this is sadly what you get. So there's no replacement for flight hours. There's no replacement for going out and exercising the mind and the muscles as far as doing the mission, learning the mission. Aircraft that needs replacing. I kind of went down a rabbit hole of the T-7 replacing the T-38. That thing is years behind schedule. And now, look, if you just look at the Air Force training program, right? Sending new student pilots to civilian programs for training, vice straight up like Mover and I did back in the day, military UPT, all of these things combined create an environment for more mishaps, in my opinion. So, there's the military way of doing business, and these aircraft, helicopters, fighter jets, bombers, whatever, they require a specific skill set, and you need to be trained in that skill set. And it's just not happening at the level it needs to be happening, man. Mover, what do you think, man?
Dude, you summed it up. I've talked to people in the know about the Air Force pilot training pipeline, and it is scary. It's scary. It's scary. Nothing happens overnight. You make one planning decision, you change one planning decision, and over time, those things cascade, they escalate, snowball, if you will. And the next thing you know, instructors are looking at ways that they can keep students alive instead of building the right foundation and sending them off to go be war fighters. I think that is part of a problem that started 30 years ago. And I've talked about this on the channel a lot. You know, if you want to go back and look, it started with the drawdown. Oops, sorry about that. It started with a drawdown and culminated in a war that was sustained in some regards for 20 years, over 20 years. And that burned out our people, our aircraft. You know, it kind of put us in a, what are we planning for? What are we fighting for? And so when you have no good procurement process to replace burned out airframes and burned out people, and you're like, the Marines are a perfect example of trying to do more with less, right? Because they're out there, you know, they're like, let's say, for example, the Hornet fleet, right? Cannibalizing Hornets to make other Hornets fly. And that's a common maintenance practice. That's not specific to the Marines. I just use them as an example because I think they do it more than anybody else, and they do it fairly well. It's a testament to those maintainers that they're doing as well as they are. But when you start talking about increased mishap rates, it always is the Swiss cheese model of things lining up. That is a combination of your airframes, your training, and your organizational structure in terms of the mindset of how you're training, right? You train like you fight, but also how are you accepting and mitigating risk? And so when you see an article like this and you say, hey, the mishap rate is up, what's the fix? You know, how do you fix that? And unfortunately, just like it took 20 or 30 years to get us to this point, I think it takes a better part of a decade to get us out of it. And it only happens with leadership at all levels that says, hey, what are our priorities? And our priorities start with training pipeline, regardless of whether it's Army, Navy, Air Force, whatever, a training pipeline with a reliable trainer that can teach students the foundational skills that they need to survive. And you and I have talked about it, Gonky. We've been in this, you know, in this show for a long time saying, hey, is it a good idea to reduce the number of hours? Is it a good idea to reduce the training footprint? Is it a good idea to stop doing X, Y, and Z? In some cases, yeah, it is. I mean, fix to fix. Is that still a thing that UPT students need? Maybe, because you may not ever do it, but the skills to learn how to do it teach critical thinking. It teaches that thinking in the jet under pressure. Because I don't know if you remember, Gonky, taking your pen out and doing the pencil method and going, God, I hope this is right, because I have no idea what I'm doing right now. You know, and just getting yourself out there. And it's not so much the activity as it is the critical thing. It's just, you know, your kids, right? You teach them things not because it's skills that they're going to need. Like, we don't teach algebra because you're going to use algebra every day. We teach because that's the way you need to learn how to form your mind to be a better logical, critical thinker. And so, yes, when planners look at the pilot training pipeline and they say, well, we don't need carrier landings anymore, we don't go to the carrier. But that's not the point. You know, when they say we don't need to do formation landings anymore, they're too dangerous, it's not the point. It's not the formation landing that is the problem. It's the discipline and the concentration and the focus. And you need that little bit of fear when you train, because this is the civilian airspace non-combat environment. What happens when the missiles start flying? And you got to build that toughness. That's why the SEALs are the way they are, right? They don't go out there and, well, you know, we don't really need to carry a log, and, you know, because we don't do that anymore. Like, it's part of a process. And I'm not saying, you know, haze for the sake of hazing, but what we have gotten to is a do less with less mindset. You know, we've punted training off to civilians, which is not the same. We have taken airplanes and tried to stretch them out longer than they were ever designed to do. We have stretched maintainers out farther than they're capable of doing in a good duty day. And even the Gettysburg thing. I mean, I'm sure when that report comes out, you're going to look at it and go, what led to this? Well, we were in an environment where we were being asked to do more with less in a very intense environment, and we made a mistake. And it was a mistake that could have been stopped here, here, and here, but because of these factors, it didn't. And that's how they always read. Every mishap report. I mean, look at the F-35 at Eielson. We lost that aircraft because of water and hydraulic fluid, and where could it have stopped? At the very basic maintenance practice, but we didn't. Like, there were 3 steps we could have saved that aircraft. Thankfully, the pilot survived. But to me, there's no price on a human life, especially these trained assets, these trained aviators. Losing an aviator, I mean, imagine if the Gettysburg had been a fatal mishap, if we'd have killed our own aviator because of that. So I do think it's important that we assess this. Do I think Congress is the way to do it? No, I think this is a leadership. This is higher level leadership that needs to figure out. And they're doing that to some degree because they're saying, hey, can we streamline contracting and figure out a way to get things faster to the warfighter?
Yeah, you bring up a lot of good points. I mean, as a warfighter, it's kind of your craft, and that's kind of what we're losing, right? So because the technology is making things easier, and it's kind of like we just do things because the machine tells us to do something, right? Instead of actually knowing what's going on and doing something. And that's where experience comes in. You bring up a good point, like using the example of formation landings. Well, they are dangerous if you cut the flying hours in half, because now you got guys and gals that have half the experience of just flying, trying to do the same things, right? So it's a snowball effect when you start thinking about it, right? You reduce flight hours, then mishaps start to happen, and then you try to mitigate that risk. So you just keep lowering the bar until everybody's just sitting in the ready room holding hands, right? So, I kind of hope, being a former Navy type, I kind of hope the Navy pays attention to the T7 thing and picks a successor to the T45 that's ready to go, instead of you needing years of development. I mean, we've talked about it before. The procurement process is just unacceptable, especially when you look at, and we'll talk about it later, but you look at China, it's like they need a plane, shows up tomorrow, right? It seems like it, but we needed F-35, 10 years ago. We needed the T7 10 years. I mean, it just goes on and on.
Yeah, F-47 is already late. I mean, it's not late because it's late. It's late because we needed it. Like,
the process
should not take this long. It just shouldn't take this long. It should not take this long. And we also need to find the balance of, we've talked about this, the day one fighter versus your workhorse. Yeah. And they should not be the same.
No, dude.
And dude, there's something to say about the peacetime dividend, if you will, of when you're in garrison and, you're not constantly spinning up for war. There's a little bit of that, what's the focus. And I think we also have that problem too. During the 2008, when I was in the B course, I was training to go to Iraq. I knew my unit was deploying. Everything I did was with that mindset. And I think now, it was the hypothetical. Now it's the hypothetical war. I mean, it could be Venezuela. I mean, that stuff is obviously in the news right now. But when don't know what your focus is, it's hard to make it. Like the Cold War guys had the Fulda Gap. Everybody knew that. Everybody knew the Russians were gonna, that's what they were trained. It never happened, but that's what they were training for.
Right. Yeah. And I'm, we're definitely not saying there constantly needs to be a boogeyman out there, but you're right. You need to have leadership that sets a clear.
Yeah. You got to have a standard. You got to have a standard, and you can't deviate from that standard. And you have to give the warfighter the tools that they need. And that includes equipment, training, funding. I mean, we just had dude, the government shutdown is going to have ripple effects for, a while. The machine needs to keep going. And every time you stop it, it just.
This isn't anything new though, man. I remember in 2010 or 09 timeframe, like when I became an instructor in the Hornet. So I just left the fleet. Mm-hmm. They started doing this crazy thing where basically the Navy was out of AT fleet, you name it, the Navy was short on it. So if your squadron wasn't going on deployment, like if you weren't in the deployment workup cycle, close to going, you just gave up all your toys. And so guys who just got back from a deployment, they would just kind of sit for months because they had to give all their AT fleers and all their, other nerd stuff to squadrons that were spinning up and or on deployment, and those guys, you know, what I mean, you can go out and do BFM, which is funsies, but that I remember thinking back then, like, I mean, I narrowly escaped that, right? I hit it pretty much at the right time, and because I was a RAG IP at the RAG, they still kept it funded enough to do, you know, normal training. But I mean, it was pretty eye-opening to see. And what ended up happening was you do a 3-year tour and you get 30% less hours than you should have, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, pilot, you know, Hornet guys and gals weren't even getting 1,000 hours in their first tour, which is kind of unheard of. So,
well, they're not doing that now.
right. But back then,
and they're being extended. So the morale's and they're looking at the airlines
and they're locked in.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah. At the root cause is poor leadership from 20, 30 years ago. Set us up for this. It's my opinion, of course.
Cascading. I think because poor leaders breed poor leaders.
Yeah.
You know, if the guy that brought me up is a poor leader, odds are I'm going to be one too. You know, because that's who raised me. That's who taught me how to play the game. You know, that's whoever teaches you the rules of the game to get to the higher levels is probably how you're going to act. And if you've got that snake in the grass mentality, you do not care about the second and third order effects. You care about what's in it for me.
This is why Gonky is stuck.
Yeah. Mover too.
Yeah, Mover and Gonky are stuck.
We are where we are. We're just angry.
Oh well.
Views are our own and do not represent the DO.
100%.